Our next guest is somebody that I grew up watching since I was a kid. I actually had two versions of this DVD in my house. I had one from my grandmother's house, and I had one from my actual house. And I just went and grabbed this upstairs.
Nice, man.
Of course,
I'm
come
on.
on over,
Actually,
celebrate.
I made the cover. I think I'm on the back. There's a little shot
You're
of the
actually
band
on the
on the
cover, right
front.
in the front. You're like
There
you're
I
right
am.
there in the back
Nice.
corner.
Yeah, with the fro and everything.
Yeah, yeah, all of it. Come on over, celebrating the 25th anniversary of this year. Of course, you were on that major tour and up celebrating the 20th. Just so much to talk about. Welcome to the show, Brent Barcus.
Man, thanks a lot. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
First thing
man.
I want to know, because I asked this question to everybody. Straight out of high school, you head on down to Nashville, get a music career going. But before you did that, was music your thing? Like, how did you get into music?
Yeah, it was everything. I mean, honestly, it's funny. My over the holidays, I was talking about this with my dad. I was way into sports in middle school, but I started taking guitar lessons in sixth grade. My mom was faithful to on Saturday mornings, drive me down to the local music store and take lessons. But my brother's 6 years older and he's a drummer, so I was always kind of into his. He was in high school bands and jamming around town and all that in the Midwest, but so sports was big for a while, middle school and stuff, just trying to figure out, what I loved and hobbies and stuff. But then, sports I didn't really have a huge growth spurt until later in high school. So it kind of petered out, sports did. So I was like, well, I got to do something to, impress girls or just hang out with my buds. So we
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
had, I put together a little pop band and that's high school just kind of took off for me because I didn't really have sports to, after school or anything. So I just like continue to learn guitar and study all that. So.
So, what kind of music was it for you? Was it like hair bands, or was it country,
You
or
know, I didn't really. I liked pop, man. I was into like Duran Duran. I liked session players. I was
yeah,
big into Toto and Steve Lukather and
Dan Huffs and all those guys?
Dan Huff is a huge mentor and friend. And
Leland Sklar, come on.
yeah, I love Leland Scar. Yeah, I mean, on the bass side, I mean, anything Landau, all the session guys in LA, and then, yeah, so I was just kind of into pop music. Anything. I love synths too. I love music that had a lot of synths and. Mr. Mister was a huge fan. I was a huge fan of Mr. Mister and Steve Ferris and that, Duran Duran, all that stuff. Just that kind of mainstream pop music.
The musician bands, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And I liked cool singers, like they had a lot of personality. And then I always liked kind of that Billy Idol, Steve Stevens. Always liked that pairing of a great rock lead singer and then a great guitar player that was kind of their sidekick.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That was always I always thought it was cool when there was like a duo thing.
It's funny, we talk about like Duran Duran and all these bands, and for a while, I found that there was like a bit of a stigma. People talking about their fandom of bands like that. They're like, oh, that's pussy music. But now everybody,
yeah.
there's such an appreciation for them, and I love that.
Well, the music, I mean, I go back now. I love reliving. I mean, it's like the arrangements. There's such cool songs and parts, and that stuff's intricate and it's hard to do. When you get older, you realize you start trying to create and produce. It's like, man, that stuff's not easy to put together. And they didn't have Pro Tools, so they weren't like moving little sound bites around. They were like actually recording the tape, So they were having to think a little harder about it.
I know. Listen, in the '80s, I had to hide my love of Phil Collins, because no, you have to listen to Venom. It's like, no, I don't listen to Phil Collins.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I was kind of because a lot of my friends were into like darker music or Pink Floyd and that kind of stuff, and I just kind of was into like I loved Live Aid and all the cool bands that were playing all the like the fresh stuff and more pop.
Yeah, even stuff like the Eurythmics and like Wham. I mean, listen to those arrangements today, and it's like, how did they do that?
No, it's amazing. Yeah, I love just great stuff, great arrangements.
I'll tell you how they did it. They did it with Leland and with Steve and all those guys who knew how to effing play.
They knew how to, and they knew when not to play, which is, obviously was another big thing that Mutt always would stress is like, you don't always have to be playing, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you listen to those Mutt arrangements, I mean, there's so much space.
Oh, yeah, there'd be parts, like you always think, oh man, it's such a little part, but man, you get all that stuff going on. You're trying to jam so much information into one section of a song. It's like, I can see why he would arrange them that way to where there might be tiny little spaces that, he'd find a little place for that just made it work. So, but you can't all be playing giant bar chords the whole time or it's going to be total disaster. So
Yeah, it's just mud. Well, let's fast
yeah.
forward then. Talk about that. I mean, Come On Over comes out and they're putting this band together. How do you originally get approached, or did you audition for Mutt? Like, how did you get into the band?
Yeah,
What's the story?
it's crazy. Yeah, thinking back, 'cause I didn't grow up in country music at all. Wasn't a fan, didn't really listen to it, and then got to Nashville. And back then, I came in the early '90s, but as things in the mid '90s, so at that time, country and pop, and at the time here, it was like you had two camps. You had your pop gospel guys, kind of Christian music and pop music, and then you had your country guys, and it was two separate worlds. Those worlds didn't the players and all the session guys, they didn't really mingle, in those. Yeah, it was really weird, but then until Garth Brooks and the Shania thing, Mutt kind of helped kind of bring that where, they started to adopt some of those sounds, and he was using Dan Huff, the session guy.
Yeah.
That kind of incorporated, oh man, you can put a wah pedal on a country album, or whatever. They started incorporating those pop elements.
Talk box.
Yeah, talk box. And so, I mean, it kind of allowed the side musicians in Nashville to kind of all start to work on different projects that weren't just strictly in the genre that they were in before, which was pretty cool. So, and that kind of changed as well in the live environment with sidemen. So it was wild. I, kind of had already been in the touring world before that, but not in country. Well, I had some friends. Dan was a mentor who was friends with Mutt, and then there were some side guys that had played some of the TV shows with Woman and Me. So, they hadn't toured, but they'd done a few TV shows. Right. She was using different players from different TV shows, and a couple of those guys, when they opted, when she was starting to really think about the tour, I kind of Mutt reached out to them. Hey, we're looking for younger guys that really want to go on the road, and so I got wind of it, and I heard, hey, John Landau Management up in New York, they're looking for people to send tapes up. You want to send a tape up? I was like, I don't even know who she is, but definitely, I'll send a tape. Yeah. So I did. Yeah. So I got a call. Like I sent some like DVD concert stuff that I'd been on, and got this call from Landau Management saying, hey, she liked your tape. She wants you to fly out and audition. So my audition was Jay Leno. That was the first time I'd ever played. Wow. So I went out, we rehearsed all day on the first single, and then that was my first show. And that's the first time I ever met them, and just basically worked on one song all day and then played the show.
Wow. So talk about meeting her and Mutt for the first time, and what is that first rehearsal like, running through that same song all day?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'd never been through that before. Obviously, running one song all day, but I was, obviously knew who he was. Obviously I grew up 80s kid, so I was familiar with most of the projects and was in awe of all those. And so yeah, I was definitely a nervous guy, but I had been in those, and I'd been in rehearsal spaces and done these live TV shows before, so that wasn't nerve-wracking as much as just wanting to do a good job, so it was just kind of like, I had, you just kind of make sure you're aware of as much of the tune as you can. And then, obviously at that point we didn't have any multi-tracks or stems yet. So I was kind of like just learning what I could from what I heard on the master, the track that we had, whatever was sent to us on. So yeah, cut best that I could. And then, Mutt knows all the parts. So if there was something I was, not quite exact on or something, he was there to, it was great. I mean, the dude he's genius, as you guys know, and he's the nicest guy in the world. So we just kind of hit it off. And I didn't know if that'd be the only, I didn't know if it'd be the only time I worked with them or not until, that the idea of that whole fall of '97 before Come On Over was, I think now looking back, it was kind of like their way of auditioning different players on these late night, these TV shows to kind of see who they'd maybe want full time. That was kind of the idea of those shows, the promos.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it about your?
I kind of just kept getting called.
Was it your look?
Huh?
Was it about the skill, or was it the look?
Well, I think skill had to come first, but it was definitely about, there was definitely a look and an image that they were looking for the whole band. As we got deeper into it, they were wanting a certain thing. And that's the whole thing with that merge of, before that, it was like country music was creased jeans and big belt buckles, and he was looking for something different. So,
yeah. I asked that question because I interviewed Randall Waller, and he was like, listen, if it was about looks, I don't think I would have gotten the gig.
Yeah. I love Randall. Oh, my boy. Yeah.
He told me some fascinating stories about working at that time. I mean, so you said learning that and then going over to the record releasing and then basically joining the band. I mean, what's that conversation like to say, okay, you're in the band, or?
Yeah, it was kind of fun. Like, I had just kept doing these late night shows or these promo shows all fall, and then around holidays, maybe you're right early 98's when they decided that they kind of just management reached out saying, hey, yeah, year ago, and so there's there's some negotiation, figuring out how much time. And basically for me, I was married, no kids, but it was moving to New York, because they were in the Adirondacks at the time. And so it was kind of leaving Nashville for a while and kind of committing to that for at least a couple of years. So it was super exciting. It was a great time. And, and gosh, how could I pass up something like that working with him? So I didn't really know what to expect. And, we didn't know what the tour was going to, she was still under this kind of under the gun of, hey, can she really sing? Can she tour? Can she put on a great show? No one really knew. So we were kind of I knew there was pressure to deliver on that show one. So that was kind of why we spent 4 or 5 months in the Adirondacks, so.
Yeah. That's still incredible to hear, that the fact that you guys were stuck up there rehearsing day after day. I mean, when I spoke to Randall, even Corey, interviewed Corey too, and he was like, Mutt just basically sat there, and he was learning French at the time, and he had his book, and he would just sit there with monitors and just listen to you guys run through the set day after day, and he would pick out certain things. Was there any crazy Mutt moments where you just went wow, this guy's out of this world?
Oh yeah, so many. The one that I don't know if you ever talked to Hardy, played keys and harmonica and percussion, really good old friend of mine, and we had worked together in the past. And there was one day I remember, this was when I realized that his hearing was different than any of ours. We had been running this song, I can't remember which tune, Hardy would know, but Hardy's piano module was starting to fade. Something inside this box was degrading, and no one. And Mutt's like, can we stop, please? Stop. Hardy, it's something over here in the keys. Just, it's sounding darker. Something's not right. And, Hardy's like, no, everything sounds fine to me. I know, something's wrong. So we, started back or whatever. And wouldn't you know it, middle through this next time running through the whole thing, the piano just took a dive. The box totally died. So he heard, out of 9 of us playing, he heard the piano's tone was starting to darken, and something was wrong with the module, and it finally totally toasted. It took a dive. So I was like, what? We all looked at each other like, he heard this box going down,
You heard it frying before it even fried.
Yeah. We were like, no, sounds good to us. And Hardy's like, no, I don't hear any difference, and it was like he could tell that the piano was darker because that box was getting ready to totally get, it was toasted. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. There were a lot of those little, there were things everything that was, I learned so much about the parts and minutiae of the way I was holding the guitar, and hey, this is played with the fingers and not the pick. And, we went through all that, which was, I loved it. You just had to embrace that kind of stuff. But I was in my point in my career, I was looking for that kind of amazing direction, because it made me a way better player and just overall lover of music and producer, to kind of see it all, that to be that determined to get every little detail right, so
yeah. What were some of the things that he gave you, direction wise, for the guitar? If you're playing certain guitar part or something, would he tell you, oh no, it should be an upstroke instead of a downstroke?
Yeah, all that. Yeah, a lot of upstroke stuff, playing closer to the bridge, so it's more attack, or if it's softer, playing up closer to the neck. Everything from that kind of stuff to the big thing for him, is his feel and just the way things swing, and learning kind of what we're talking about, when not to play, and up, when you come off a note, and listening to the snare drum of feeling that backbeat and knowing that you should be off the note so that it just feels right, and just not letting all that stuff get mushy and messy was just huge for us, schooling us on all that to make that groove feel right, and which he had just nailed on the records, and you can do in editing, obviously Pro Tools and clean things up like that, but live, you got to really be on it to kind of get those, those off notes, and playing in those and staying out of those pockets, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Talk about the guitar rig a little bit for that tour, because Randall was just basically, it was just like a GT3 or GT5 or something like that, and but recreating those sounds of the records. Now they're iconic guitar tones to me. They're up there with Back in Black and Hysteria, those tones. Absolutely. Trying to pull that off live, what was that process like? Was Mutt in the studio, in the rehearsal space with you, going through amps and stuff, or?
Yeah, we went through everything, and he had an assistant that had documented all of Huff's and everybody's racks and patches. So I got
Wow.
what was different about Randall and I is, see, Randall came in later because so I'd gotten there. I was first in with the core guys, like, so I was there most of that first, early '98. Well, Randall, we were still looking for that second guitar spot that could sing some leads with her, harmonies, And so Randall was later. So I think his rig kind of was more a product of he didn't have as much time to, tinker around. He came in like in May, so he only had like 4 weeks to get up to speed. I was there for months, so I kind of was part of with him, just kind of sitting down and going through all the different gear and amps and stuff that they'd used on the record. So mine got kind of ridiculous with the refrigerator rack with, I had kind of the country setup, which was pedals in a rack with Bradshaw with the pedals in front of the amps for the country stuff. And then we had kind of the slicker pop stuff that, the rack stuff with all the preamp and power amp for all the slicker pop stuff that I used as well. So I had the Bradshaw system going. And
wow.
So we went through all that, every sound. I wanted to make sure, he wanted that Fender tone. We had Matchless, we had Marshall, and kind of went through all that with him.
Yeah, because a lot of those guitar tones on the record, I mean, they're just so specific. You listen to like the clean intro on When and like trying to pull it off, and or those like really cool like those Dan Huffy kind of like open, clean, chorusy kind of tones.
Yeah, it's cool. The swells and
yeah.
So we had a stereo rig and a mono rig going, and it was fun. It was the ultimate geek out because it was like, if we need something, we're gonna get it, So it was kind of, there wasn't really any barriers to budget on that. So it was like he wasn't going to spare any expense to have all the stuff we needed. So there was a great story on gosh, I'm trying to think which song on the record that there's a couple key changes, and I remember there's a part in
Come On Over.
Maybe it's Come On Over. There's one of those where there's a lot of open string jangles. He called them jangles, and so obviously the key change. The jangles become. You have to bar it, or capo. But
and Rock This Country, I know after the solo section, it goes up like a half step.
Yeah, that was okay. But there's a clean jangle on, maybe it's in, if you're not, I don't have to look back. It's been so long. But what was cool is he's like, well, what are we going to do? Because we started rehearsing it. And so obviously we're all going in these, raising the key, but we're like playing it in bar chords. And he's like, he stopped us. This isn't going to work. I want to hear the ringing strings. I was like, well, we don't have time to throw the capo on. We talked about roller capos. Jeez. And he's like, well, what if we just have double neck guitars built? And we just, the next neck is the next key. I was like, that's pretty genius. Fender's going to make us like these double necks and we just have two different keys. We just go to the next key and jangle. And can
you imagine that conversation at the Fender custom shop? Hey, so Mutt Lange just called and wants double necks, so this way the second guitar will be a half step up.
Yeah, I loved it. So we debated. That was taken seriously for about a day or so, and then it's
wow.
Then it was like, we got to figure out another arrangement. So that's just too much for one, a section of a tune or something. So that kind of stuff, though, he's like, well, if we need it, we need it. How are we gonna make this work? Because we're not, it doesn't sound right, so It was pretty cool.
Were you guys playing to tracks on that tour, or did that only come in on the up tour?
No, we had a track, but a lot of stuff was like just, auxiliary percussion and cool shakers and any of that backing stuff that really made the track swing that, that obviously JD couldn't pull off,
Right.
But maybe some so that tour we had the background vocals, because the stacks are so huge. So it'd be nine of us live, and then his so that was different about the first tour. First tour were his vocals. The second tour, which I thought was super cool, Corey and we all got together early, and he wanted all of our vocals stacked. So we recreated his parts from the second from Up.
From Up. Oh wow.
Yeah. So all the backing tracks on the second tour were all the band singing live. We went in the studio and did it all ourselves. So that was cool. That was a lot of fun. Yeah. So we got with Nigel in LA, Nigel Green, and redid all the vocals for that tour.
Damn, that's cool.
It was cool, man. So Nigel had a studio in his house out in suburbs of LA. I was living out there at the time. And so we spent a couple of weeks and just re-recorded all that stuff because Mutt he's like, I don't want my vocals in the tour, so that was awesome. So we, got to do that. So.
Well, technically on that first tour, you were singing with Mutt Lange every night.
Yeah, no, that was cool too. Yeah. I loved hearing that in my ears every night, but I think he wanted just to be a little more realistic on the second,
Here's a little
Wow.
bit of a even nerdier question for you. So obviously at the time, Alex Van Halen and Jerry Harvey kind of designed the in-ear monitors, the first pair, and all the, it's kind of in its infancy, the in-ear monitor systems. How did they sound on stage?
How do they? It's funny.
Well, at the time,
I
I mean, like, late 90s, I
yeah.
mean, they were still pretty new,
Yeah, they're
but
kind of, yeah, you're right. I'd used them a little bit before. They were okay. Like they were, I think we had gotten into at that point, it was just like the dual driver was a big deal. It was like, oh, two speakers. So you get a little more, because there was never really a lot of low end. That was the trouble. Like you got a lot of, it was just bright, and, guitars never sound like guitar players that, you like feeling the air under your feet, the cabinet, you just get that natural, and it's not sitting directly at your ear. It's like you almost get a little self-conscious when it's so direct, it's kind of weird. So learning kind of how to either add a little reverb or just to feather it a little bit, so it's a little more natural and especially when you put a speaker in like a cabinet and then close it kind of can feel muffled and dry, so that, yeah, it's tough getting used to that. We tried it. I remember we were at Lake Placid Arena for like 4 weeks. That was when we got into the production side of things with the stage.
Mhm.
And at first, I remember we got up there and they had put all of our big 212s or 412s up on stage. So there were the cabinets everywhere when we first started. And that totally, I could tell, because they were really loud. And she was like, I can't hear anything. All she was hearing was guitars blowing across stage. And then obviously the front of house guy was like, it's too loud. So that's when we kind of went to we had the ears, but we just decided to drop the cabinets to under the stage. And it was fine. You just get used to it, but
yeah.
it's never the same as having it, right behind you. But these days,
Yeah. I mean, well,
it's
now
totally different now. Now you got like eight drivers, and then, and you got a lot of, everybody's so used to either Kempers or Axe Effects or whatever. So the modeling, everything's so much better,
Yeah. I when I spoke to Randall, he told me this funny story and talking about that being at Lake Placid Arena and rehearsing with the cabinets on stage. He said that you guys put them under the stage eventually and then they were isolated. But he told me a story about the front of house engineer before Nigel came in to do the mix. And he said that Mutt basically heard sound check and was like, stop, nope. And he spent like a whole day just like EQing the kick drum.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, grab an EQ, like graphics, just to like trying to like, taking the room out of these giant, I mean, we're in an empty cement dome, or arena. And it's like, yeah. So he was, and he did not like live sound. Obviously he wasn't a fan of it. And also, he wanted sound guys to know the music, just like we had spent months and months on. He didn't want some guy in there just like, this sounds great, just throwing up faders. And he wanted them to know every dB of rides of what we had learned, these parts. He didn't want anybody to, he wanted to hear it all, so
yeah,
it was brutal. I can't imagine they went through several guys until Nigel came back. So,
wow.
Yeah,
because that makes sense. I mean, now obviously in rehearsal you can dial it all in automation and have your screenshots and these things. But if you want that fiddle part to pop in after the second verse, I mean, you had to physically know the song to ride the faders and.
Yeah, so he was wanting those guys to be listening to music and know kind of if it's fiddles, manos, what's the section that needs to kind of be adjusted. And so you just couldn't just like, and fair, some of these guys that came the first tour, Landau management had Springsteen, and so a lot of the crew came over because Springsteen was off that season. So we got some of those guys, and it's just a different vibe, the music for Springsteen, it's like, you got a bunch of guys playing acoustic strumming G chords or whatever, just it's more that bar rock. And so you can kind of put the faders up and get a good vibe going, and it kind of sits there. You might ride a sax or something, but you're talking his stuff so intricate, like that wasn't the vibe that he was looking for. He was looking for that studio mix, constantly riding everything, So it was a whole different type of show,
Was there talking to Corey and talking to Randall, I mean, did you experience this sort of stigma about being in that band where you guys just played and sounded so good that people just thought you were miming the whole time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's so weird. It's so long ago. So it was kind of pre all the social media stuff. We didn't feel like we were getting hit all the time, but I mean, there was talk of that. And I remember even some of the, I knew some of the guys that had played with her previously, you know, like, oh, they, like you were saying, they went for look instead of, you know, but man, no way. These guys, everybody in the band, I mean, you know, amazing players, you know, and so we had to know what we were doing. But yeah, I mean, you get that. I mean, it was definitely, you know, the way she kind of dressed us all, and I loved how I think one of her geniuses was always including us. It wasn't like her out there and then we were all in black just standing in the back. You know, a lot of
like a
artists
wedding
do
band.
that. Yeah, you know, a lot of artists do that, or just they don't know what to do with the band, or they feel like maybe they're going to get you know, showing up or something. But she always had such confidence to let us kind of roam freely. I mean, she's like, you can walk in front of me, you're never gonna outperform, you know, they're here to see me, which you know, I got that, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
So she let us roll. She let us roll with whatever. And we had different places we had to be at certain times because of pyro or whatever. But besides that, we could just kind of move, do what we wanted. You know?
Yeah. That's why I loved watching this DVD so much, because it seemed like so much fun, you know, being on stage. I mean, seeing the entire band roaming around like it was a band. It seemed like, you know, it was like watching.
It was.
Like I used to watch Van Halen live without a net, and you see Eddie and Sammy and Mikey, you know, running up and down the stage, and that was the same kind of vibe on this DVD. And it was like, it just seemed like like a power band, you know. It just seemed like so much fun.
It was, and we all genuinely liked each other. I mean, I always say, Corey and I laugh, like, if there would have been a reality, it would have been fun. Like, I think it could have been a cool reality TV show, but you know, just throwing 9 of us in this band that like had never, from all 4 corners of the earth, you know, Australia to everywhere, Canada. And so, I mean, it was cool just that we all ended up, I mean, they did a good job to be able to get us all to where we actually enjoyed hanging and being, because we were together so much. It's like, it worked, you know, and you know, you can tell it really worked to go 2 long tours like that and have the same people is kind of rare, you know?
Yeah.
So everyone really enjoyed it.
Let me go ask you about some of the other stuff you do, the sound branding.
Yeah.
Which I find fascinating. Is that something that you were interested in before working with Shania and Mutt, or did you listen to what they were doing and creating a sound for her and going, hey, you know what? Sound is really important. And talk to me about how you brought that to the Nashville Predators, to the sports teams, to brands, and say, you know what? You can't just be a logo. People need to hear you and go, that's a Pepsi. Oh, that's an Apple. Talk to me about that.
Great question. I mean, no, it's not. I mean, I wish I would have been an early adopter, and that, you know, obviously, you know, brands have always had their jingles. Obviously, that's the term from the past is,
right.
You know, brands used to be more focused on what they sounded like, you know, and it kind of
you listen to old school radio jingles like, you know, 102.7.
Yeah, but
it's 7.
Well, okay, let me stop you there for a second, because you look back in the 70s too. I'd like to buy the world a Coke. They had songs. I mean, it was a song. We've moved away from that, where you hear, like, you know, Sports Center, and you hear the and you go, oh, hey, Sports Center's on. Mm-hmm. And it's done within 3 seconds or less.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that, because it's become a science.
Yeah, and the sonic logo. I mean, and I think with these days, with less attention span of everybody moving to so many different, or not the visual, you know, maybe you're listening or you're on Alexa or whatever device, you're on voice device. I mean, to be able to hear a brand and recognize that, you know, and maybe based on 3 or 4 notes, you know, that mnemonic they call it, or a sonic logo, or, I mean, that's huge. So yeah, it's very important these days, especially like you're saying, with more and more you know, opportunities to market without a visual, you know, and so it's needed. So it's definitely growing. It's definitely, it's hard to get sometimes with certain brands, you know, for them to really buy in. It's because it needs to not just be that identity. It needs to kind of go across the whole brand in different touch points. And that's hard to really get them to adopt it in all of their content, you know, because that's the more people hear it, obviously at beginning and ends of their content, obviously the more we're going to remember it. So sometimes they'll do it. Sometimes they'll do it on like one spot, or we'll do it specifically for a certain campaign. But if it's not in everything, if they don't start to embrace it as a company wide, which is hard because sometimes these companies are so large, they're siloed. The marketing team might not be speaking to the sales team, and so to get in and use it as like a and have these you know, audio examples for them that they can actually use throughout the company. It takes time to adopt that.
And I mean, you listen to certain brands. I mean, yogurt commercial is going to be sunshine ukulele music, and then
Well,
Applebee's
that's what I
going to
want
be
to.
some blues rock. So it's
I
like,
want to talk about the research that goes into it
yeah,
in terms of, okay, you're doing an ad for the Mitch and Jeremy podcast. What's the first thing you look at and say, okay, Mitch and Jeremy are two white guys, so I need rock. Like, how do you sort of approach it? And I don't mean that in any kind of racist way, but what's the research that goes into it to
Yeah, there's a
say
lot.
this brand
Yeah.
needs this music?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, and sometimes it's not even genre specific as much as because I think that you can use I think more of it can be melody specific or because I think you can introduce different instruments, but you can play that melody with different instruments, obviously. And
Right.
so to me, the melody or the whatever progression of those notes that are used, as long as they're being used consistently, then that's what is the repetition of then people remembering that, obviously.
yeah.
But I think demographically, it is knowing the audience, and then just how specifically it's going to be used. If it's a short form piece of content, or that's why most of the time, we try to start with the sonic logo, because then that can be used that could be anything from I'm loving it to dun dun dun. It could be some chimes or three or four notes. Because that can be used in so many different forms of content. So
right,
yeah. And then then you would be blowing out longer pieces from there, because those notes or melodies need to be interwoven inside all those other forms of content.
But I'm curious. I'm a company, and I come to you and I say, okay, here's our show. Do something. Where do you start? You just say, well, oh, I have a thought of my idea. It's just sort of magically creative, or where do you start? What's the first step in saying, okay, I'm going to create this sonic logo for this company, Mitch's company? What's your first step?
Well, honestly, the visual assets are important too. So most of the time companies have already gone down that road. So there are attributes on the visual side, whether it's colors, what does the logo look like, who is the audience, and then taking all the visual side of things, because obviously they normally have all that if it's not an upstart, or a new company. Yeah. And then those visual assets can then hopefully be in turn, the idea of then is to turn that into, okay, what does that sound like? You can take it from colors to,
you look at red and go, red sounds like an electric guitar.
I mean, think about red sounds. No, I mean, there's scientific. Red definitely has more of a, when you think of red,
it's angry, right?
A rock
red
is edge, than blue. Blue's going to be softer or more clean, or. Well, so you're taking those visual assets and then turning that into, the audio side.
Look, I'll give you an example. Working at the B92.5 in Montreal, I mean, our market research team, they go in and, they were like, oh, well, what would be a good, we're targeting women that are 40 years old, soccer moms, bank managers, divorced, trying to get laid, trying to find some love, trying to separate their time between work and getting their kids to the field. And they take all these things and they try and develop a product to target them. And they're like, okay, we like purple, but what kind of purple? Okay, well, then we're going to take all these colors of purple and we're going to do all this research. And then they went with raspberry. It's a raspberry purple. Okay. Because it's not just purple. It's not blue. It's in between. It's a very friendly. It's not pink. It's raspberry. And then they go from there and then they look at, how we all look on the air and stuff and our photos and our headshots. And then it comes to the on-air version, which is the sonic logo. I mean, you go to a company like Wise Buddha or Real World or Imaging Blueprint, and they create your station's The Beat 92.5. Okay, so you got 6 notes there. How can we turn that into a melody? And it's like dun, 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 and then you got your sonic logo.
Totally.
I mean, so it's funny how you could start with a color literally and then go from there.
Yeah, totally.
Wow.
Yeah. It's really interesting. So, that's just kind of one facet of what I do. I really enjoy that side. But like I said, there some brands it's kind of have early adopted it. MasterCard, some of the bigger brands are definitely working using that. But it's hard. It's hard to get. Companies are just so not sure, or they don't want to be too early in something. So it's constantly kind of like, and I just did a AT&T spot, and I've worked on those things for them, and it's like, well, are we going to include the, the logo, the Sonic logo at the end? So depending on the spot, like they'll forget, or they won't use it in certain spots. Or if I'm not on this, they've got another client doing something else. They're just so big. Like, so if it's trying to get them to embrace it on all the content, it's tough.
And it's also about, like the type of read that's going to go over it. I mean, like, you're not going to be MasterCard can help you go on your dream vacation and then have like rug like under it,
Yeah.
You kind of do. It's kind of like the full picture.
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing I was listening to. You were talking in one interview that I was watching about the Nashville Predators and how you had to come up with stacked 80s vocals with a sort of a rock guitar, but you couldn't put any lyrics in it because there had to be a space for talk over. And it was fascinating. So do you actually sort of have to create that and have those moments where you can have the talk over hit certain notes and inflections? And I mean, it's a synergy. It all works together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been super fun getting to work with them. So I'm a huge hockey fan, so it's always fun to be able to work with
Habs go
with the local team. But yeah, that comes back to working with the creatives and finding those spots where they know they're going to have the voiceover or whatever is going to be, promoting the ticket sales or the season tickets or whatever they're doing, whatever the promotion is. But yeah, and then just being able to work those vocals, or this was a cool promotion where I got to definitely felt like my large Mutt track. I had the big power chords and the big, the big arena rock stacks, and got to do all the fun overdubs. It's cool.
Creatively, is it as satisfying as being a musician on stage creating songs? I mean, knowing that you're in an airport and you hear an ad for AT&T and you go, "That's mine," and nobody knows it, but you know it.
Right. Yeah.
Is it creatively as satisfying, or is it like, oh, damn it, hey, Susie, I did this. It's me. Let's go.
You're standing in line at Auntie Annie's. You're like,
yeah.
I did that.
Yeah, right.
Get that Nashville?
Like, Dad, who cares? No. I think it's a different, I think it's a different skill set, so I think I enjoy it. I did the live thing for so long and kind of, as a kid, I was like, I got to fulfill that, being on stage, being the side man to the stars, if you will, that was kind of always a dream, was to get in that world. So I loved that. And that performer side of me really enjoyed it. But the night after a while, it's like, okay, can I expand my skill set enough as I get farther in my career to be able to, to tap into other parts of the industry, it's like a new fulfilling, you can always kind of, like we all do, like set new goals. And so when I hear something like, an ad or something, it's fulfilling. It's just a different feeling, because it's not like 20,000 people, but the creative side is fulfilling, because I'm having to like tap a new, part of my creative life.
But that's also got to be good for you personally and the family life. So I was talking to Kevin Valentine, the drummer. He did stuff with Kiss and Cinderella and all that, and now he scores movies for Hollywood, Magnum PI. And he says, "You know what, Mitch? I get to go in, I get to be creative, but then I get to go home to the dog and the kids." Yeah, and I love that.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, and I've built this. I've got my home studio, so it's like, it's cool. Like I said, kids will run down the steps here and there and check in, or I'll go upstairs and take a break. And it's nice to be able to create, mix, work on tunes or work with ad agencies and be at home. It's amazing.
Right. And then not sleep in a tube while you drive down the road for 4 hours or whatever.
There was a season where I loved that, but it was obviously taking care of early teen kids, so it's fun to be home and not miss, I now see the ones that had to like give up those early kids years, miss the kids walking or birthdays, we were gone so much. I can see now maybe it didn't hit me as much then, because I wasn't a dad at the time, so I probably wasn't as sensitive to their pain of missing those events. But so I just kind of, once the tour thing started, I thought, I'm going to move on, and if we're going to have a family, I'm going to try to stay in the creative world but not be gone all the time. So it's kind of a commitment to my marriage as well. It's like those things take a toll, so.
When you're on the road with Shania, do you guys get to stay at the Ritz-Carlton with her, or do they put the band at like the Lodge?
No, that they're Motel 6.
That's the thing. What was cool about her was like the Ritz part was like they took care of us, like that was our kind of the band, West End, W, all that stuff was band, and she'd always stay at something even like a horse boutique place or something, like hers was a whole nother level. You know, some
Boutique bed
estate
and breakfast.
some estate with, you know, for horses. So she took it to another level and kept us at the cool places. Yeah, it was fun.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, hey,
Yeah. It wasn't yeah, they took really good care of us.
which is nice because I've known a lot of bands where they'll basically get a shower room and they'll park the bus at the fucking
Yeah.
Holiday Inn and then just each walk into the room and then go back and sleep on the bus and you go,
Yeah, some of those tours, yeah, I've done those where it's like either Weekend Warrior or just smaller budgets where, you know, you're either you're sharing rooms or you're just you're cleaning up in one. Everyone's cleaning up in one.
right, the shower room.
Yeah.
The shower tour.
And then jumping on the bus and moving on. So I had those before.
Yeah,
On the call sheet after the show, it's like, okay, 20 minutes to the shower room at the Econo Lodge. Right. Overnighter on bus to Mississauga. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man.
It's not as glamorous as people think all the time. You know, they have these conceptions that you're all out catering and champagne and you're in the parking lot at the Holiday Inn sharing one shower room. It's just like, man.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be tough, man. And there's a lot of that, you know, especially this day and age with
budgets.
You know, things are different. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody
they don't have the album sales supporting that anymore. So
what's next for you? Do you continue to grow your company or do you say, okay, I want to be a full-fledged record producer. I want to be the next Mutt Lange. I'm not doing this jingle nonsense anymore. Let me move to Switzerland. Let me get some bands. Let's go.
You know what? I'm really kind of building. I really like working with more on the brands and agency side. I really like that. I do my occasional, like right now I'm mixing a band called Sun Sawed in Half, really cool band from the 80s and 90s. So I like to mix EPs here and there. I'll get the kind of the band fix here and there, but I really like the brands just kind of because I like the idea of on the creative side, like we were talking earlier, kind of seeing projects through from start to finish, and I can be a part of the whole creative phase. You know, I enjoy the mixing side as well with bands, but obviously you're on the back end and where it's been produced, and so I do some of that, but I like the creative side where I'm kind of involved in the whole process. And normally for my work, that's kind of happens on the agency and the brand side, because I'm kind of hired on the audio to kind of take care of the whole audio process, whether it's custom music, sound design, voiceover, dialogue, all that stuff is kind of happening in my world, and then all the way through to the final mix. So it's kind of fun to be a part of that. So for me, it's just growing the network of brands and agencies to work with. And, you know, I'm kind of way into the Dolby Atmos music and Dolby Atmos mixing right now. It's kind of the whole new immersive thing. So that's a whole nother space that we're kind of involved in and trying to kind of, you know, get more exposure working in. So
what's the biggest difference between that and like taking the stems from the original mix and turning it into a Dolby mix?
Yeah, no, that's a lot of that's happening too, you know, especially back catalog where there's stems. It's quicker that way, but it's always nice to have more control over the individual parts, just because then you can bounce your own, or you know, I've found that, and not to get too heady, but Objects, which is Atmos, the object mixes that are the parts that are more mono based or just have more effect in that immersive space than a stem, you know, a stereo stem. It's harder to do stuff with it. It doesn't have as much of that immersive thing to it. So anyway, the more mono tracks that I can have from the original files is the best, you know.
Wow.
Or when I'm creating, or it's even amazing, like even creating, if you're creating something, if you know it's going to be an Atmos thing, it's cooler to even think about, okay, how's this going to work in the Atmos space, you know, to be able to be thinking about that ahead of time when you're creating.
Yeah. One last question before we start to wrap up here. I was always curious about this. When you guys performed with Elton John on that Live in Miami performance, what was that conversation like? Did, you know, Shania come in and say, hey, so we got Elton John and you need to learn the song? Or like, how did that whole thing happen?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, gosh, there was that and Backstreet Boys. So we were all pumped. You know, I was a huge Backstreet. Mutt had been on that. I think he'd worked on that Millennium album.
Yeah.
And I think we had recently seen them. We'd caught them on a night off or something. And I'm a huge Max Martin fan. So
same. Yeah.
Oh man, he's great. So anyway, so we were pumped. It was more just like, yeah, here's the we're gonna, you know, he's gonna sing on these two tunes of mine, and we're gonna play one of his, and So we all dove into the track, and we didn't get a lot of direction. You know, it's funny. I thought for sure he'd either have an MD there or he would have some direction for us. But we ran a few times with him, and he looked back at us and kind of did the thumbs up. And
Yeah.
you know, we played it many times just for obviously for the final recording. I can't remember if they ended up, you know, mixing it or I think it went down live, but I can't remember if it was live that night or not. But yeah, so you know, they just had a bunch of performances, and I don't know if Mutt chopped it up or whatever at the end for the final or what, but it went. I thought it was a great night. I remember that. It was so much fun. Yeah.
Honestly, that version of Something About the Way You Look Tonight is my favorite version because
Oh,
like the album version is good, but that live arrangement that you guys put together is just
that
great.
was fun. Yeah, it was super fun. He's what a singer and what an entertainer, you know. So I do remember he had his own. He had a piano tech that took care of his soft drinks, and I've never seen somebody work a soft drink like I don't know if it was part of his gig, but he had this like this ice, like this chest or this thing with ice with all these drinks in it. He kept moving it around, like make sure it was in the perfect spot for Elton. It was cool. It was like the ice, a drink tech. Yeah, like man, this guy.
He had a bar tech.
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, he was only playing a couple songs, but he kept moving this thing around. There's like this stainless chest that had ice in it and all these cans of soda or whatever, and he'd move it around and make sure it was in the right spot. It's cool.
Yeah. One last question. What was the one guitar part that Mutt gave you the most grief over?
Man, good question. I think I would say it wasn't hard was the rhythm part of Man I Feel Like a Woman, getting the feel just right. The ZZ Top part, you know, the two fingers.
Yeah.
You'd think it was the simplest thing, but just the way it's attacked, it was fingers 1 and 2, and just we were talking about earlier, like coming off of those notes and then being super clean. He just never felt like it. It took forever to get it to feel right with the drums. So anyway, that took the longest probably, but it was awesome. Once we, and then also, you know, it's hard because you're not just sitting in a chair with him with the, you know, in the studio, you know, you're moving around. So like trying to nail that and it be right for him, but still being a performer is kind of the art form of that. Like, how can you nail it and still be on stage and pull it off, you know?
Wow. If this was today, I mean, after 5 months of rehearsal, you'd be posting on Instagram while doing the.
Oh man, I would be. I'd have like I'd have several million followers.
I want to ask you one question about Mutt. When you talk about those parts, at some point it's motivating because he says we need you to do this and you got to. But does it get to a point where it becomes discouraging, where you just go, I can't, I don't know what this guy wants. I'm done. Like it
might have been a few times.
It's a fine line, right?
He was such the iconic. He was such the amazing. The way he produced. You know, he just always wanted the best, to get the best out of you. He just knew ways. It was never belittling or you can't do this. It was always encouraging, like you're going to nail this. And just so you kind of always wanted to obviously please him, you know, and just the way he communicated that was, he just had done it so much, obviously in the past on working with so many great bands and in the studio and getting what he wanted. You didn't quite know how to get there, or maybe if you could get there, but just the way he encouraged you, it seemed like he just knew how to like take you to another level, you know? So you wanted to master that. You wanted to meet him there if you could, you know? So that was always my enjoyment, was like, hey, I just want to please this guy. Cause I mean, he's obviously a master and I want to do a great job. So you just kind of always kept going, you know, the back of your mind, you're always like, there'd be times on the road, I'd be like, hey man, am I nailed? Is everything sounding good to you? You know, I'd always make sure I'd check in, cause he'd stand at the console every night, you know, but yeah.
Like a dad watching over his kids.
Yeah, is this cool? Like, am I doing? He's like, oh man, yeah, Brent, it's great, man. You sound great. But because by then, man, after 5 months, I mean, if we didn't have it, it was like, you know. So.
Yeah. Like, what are you doing here? I mean,
on to the next TV show rehearsal. Who's that guy playing tonight? Who's that guy on Kimmel? Wait.
Yeah.
Where did Brent go? What happened? Was Mutt like just like overly positive to the point where it's just like, you know, he'd be so encouraging that like you'd feel bad if you didn't like perform?
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
if you
didn't, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, it was like you wanted it so bad to like and to you know, do a great job for him, and she was so encouraging. Obviously, you know, she was super encouraging, and I felt like we all kind of like, you know, we were obviously all kind of became best friends just because we were on stage together every night, you know? So, and I think she felt close to us because, you know, she didn't have a ton of close friends and had lost so much in the past. So I think that we were kind of a security blanket to her, you know, being on stage, and she trusted all of us. And so that and I'm glad that 5 months kind of being there every day. And I think that kind of built up being with them so much, you know, and they felt like we were family in a way because they could trust us, and we basically lived with them that whole time, you know. So
Yeah.
Here, and here's my absolute final question. Did Mutt, when he started producing your stuff, and did he always look forward, or did he come to you and say, hey, with Foreigner we did this, we want you to try? Was he looking back, or was he always looking forward in terms of musically, like, I'm moving this, I'm not thinking about Foreigner and AC/DC and Def Leppard, I'm on to Shania now?
yeah, he didn't use those as references very often. He would reference,
But he did. Okay.
yeah, but he would reference guitar players, like he'd say, or styles. He'd say it's more like the, you know, the ZZ Top thing, you know, that part, or he because how he conceptualized it maybe for the record, he would maybe go back to those of what he was after, so that I would have a reference to go, okay, it needs to be more, the tone has to be more like this, and this guy played more on the back of the guitar, or he played, you know, it was this pickup where I'm not playing the right instrument, it needs to be more of a hollow body. So he would use references of styles or players for me, but not really past bands that he'd worked with, you know.
Yeah.
I wanted all those questions answered. So it'd be more like catering or on breaks, like, you know, tell me about this. Cause I try to be careful not to work him over too much about old stuff, but he would always love to share if I, you know, like
Talk
Jukebox
to me about
Hero,
Mick Jones, please.
I know, man.
Let me hear about Mick.
And
come on.
yeah, so he'd always have fun little stories about that stuff. But I guess I just didn't press him too much. I didn't want him to feel taxed about it, you know, but
Yeah.
I always wanted to learn. I was just wanting to learn, you know.
Just imagine being that guy, you know. Hey, can you tell me about Bryan Adams?
Yeah.
Just, God.
Yeah, but you know,
And
it's funny.
I'm a huge Keith Scott fan too. So
He's the best.
Yeah,
he
he's
is
the man.
absolutely the most underrated guitar.
Keith's the best, and we've chatted
40
a lot of
years,
circles. Man. I know. We've had some good fun talking Mutt stories with Keith and I. So that's.
But he's
fun.
a Boston Bruins fan, so meh.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Oh well.
Love Keith. Love Keith.
We do.
Love him. Yeah, we've always wanted to interview Keith. I got to hang with him backstage at a show once, and like that was really cool. But I was like, man, just a conversation with him like would be incredible. So if you know him, tell him to drop us a line.
I will, yeah, man. Because I know you've had Bryan several times. Do you have a recent one with Bryan?
Yeah, we did. That was actually the show I hung out with Keith backstage. We did that interview with Bryan on his stage actually in an empty house.
I've never seen that.
Funny story about that. We were backstage at first, and then Bryan wasn't happy with the lights in the room we were in. So he's like, "Oh, is the stage available?" And Jody was like, "Yeah, we can go." So he's like, "All right, let's go to the stage." 10 minutes later, we're set up on the stage to do the interview.
Nice.
Well, because Bryan's got that whole photographer mind. He's like, "No, this is not going to look good."
That's totally true.
He goes, the stage with the whole thing back. He goes, that's going to look good.
He's like,
that's
that Rembrandt lighting on my face isn't looking good.
No, it was hilarious. It was great. I was there. That was awesome. Fun. And we've done Mickey Curry a bunch of times too.
Yeah.
And I've got Pat Stewart coming up too. So
nice.
A lot of great guys. Pat Stewart's great, man.
He's awesome. And we're trying to get Dan Huff too. So if you got a line to him.
Yeah, I'll text Dan. Yeah, I'll tell him. Not that he'd do it because of me, but at least I could push him that way.
He's a giant.
That'd be awesome. I was trying to get my buddy a big machine to set me up, and he's like, "Oh, he's in the middle of recording with Lady A right now. I don't know if it's possible."
Man,
he's busy.
What an icon, Dan Huff, man. I mean,
yeah.
Huh?
I mean,
so many great parts, so many great records.
You know what? It's the guitar tone for me, man, and like those tasty licks, and just like it's like that '80s jangle clean tone that he had. Just especially like I love that on YouTube. It's still up there. It was an instructional video that he put up when he was for Giant, like Time to Burn, that record.
Oh,
and like, it's so interesting to see him like break down the guitar parts and stuff.
Yeah, just how they're layered and totally cool.
Yeah.
I love all that stuff.
I love all these the back guys. I mean, I've been friends with Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner, and I just love those stories because those are the real nitty gritty stories. Because they actually played on the records.
Well, Mitch, we talk about this all the time. I mean, when I interview the Lady Gagas and the Demi Lovato, and it's like, hey, so talk about what's your favorite candy bar? Oh, hey, like, what's your favorite Instagram filter? But then I'm like, I'm going to talk about the music, like,
Yeah.
So much more interesting.
Totally.
And listen, we interviewed Leland not too long ago, and we did 2 interviews with him because he was just so fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, he's got so much history. Kind of amazing. Yeah.
Anyway, we're an hour in. Let us all say merci beaucoup as we do in Montreal.
Yep, absolutely. And
Thank
if
you,
we ever
guys.
get down to Nashville, we'll catch a game together.
Man, let's do it. Please come down. And please feel free to reach out. I'd love to connect.
We'll see the Predators and the Bruins, and we'll bring Keith Scott with us.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah, we'll hit Broadway, hang out. There's so much going on. You guys need to come see.
Yeah.
Merci bien. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you reaching out.
Cheers.
An all-new episode of The Mitch, Lafon, and Jeremy White Show.
Tuesday at noon.
Available wherever you stream.